Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Business Day Focus 4.0 conference in partnership with Adept IT, the CRM team, Payfast, Cloud ZA, University of Pretoria, Fixed Mobile Telecoms, Tshwane University of Technology. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Nastassia Arendse, and I will be your host for today. So in a world that is developing with so much unprecedented change, it seems to be that South Africa finds itself at digital crossroads, so to speak. So it'll be the businesses that evolve and adapt to all of these changes that thrive. But the question we're trying to answer today is, well, how do you go about it? People are hearing a lot about skills, they're hearing a lot about words such as AI and automation. So the sessions today are going to be split into two. In the first panel, we're going to be talking about how do you cultivate a workforce that is ready for the future, that not just only embraces change, but drives it, that fosters innovation, that is resilient and adds all of those things as its pillars to success. And in the second part, as I mentioned, AI, automation, data analytics, how do we bring all of these disruptive technologies together to help, you advance in your engagements when it comes to your reshaping your business models, dealing with your customers, and various other aspects. So throughout the day, you're going to hear from industry thought leaders. They're going to be sharing their insights. We're going to have two very engaging panel discussions, as I mentioned. And it gives you the opportunity, not just for the audience that is with us in the room, but those who are watching us online, to ask those questions that you've always been wanting to ask, especially as we talk about the idea of disruptive technologies, or even what skills are going to be needed for this future that we talk about. So I really do look forward to engaging with you, and I hope that you will use the opportunity to ask your questions if there's a comment and pose it to not just our keynote speaker, who's very exciting, but also to the panelists who are going to be with us throughout the day. So in terms of the questions, we will have a Q&A session available. We'll have mics moving around the room, and those of you who are online, there is a facility for you to be able to type in your questions. So it's going to be very exciting, lots of learning ahead. And to start us off, please welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, and that is Prof. Wesley Rosslyn-Smith. He's a director for the Center of Future of Work. And just a little bit about him: as a pioneer in the realm of digital transformation and the future of work, Prof. Rosslyn-Smith holds the position of Associate Professor of Corporate Strategy, Turnaround Management, and Business Analytics at the University of Pretoria. And as I mentioned, he directs the Center for the Future of Work, where he champions groundbreaking digital transformation initiatives. And this is all in partnership with the university as well as network of global collaborators. Prof, please join us on stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great privilege to actually be here and speak to you on such an interesting and exciting topic, which is consuming more and more of our daily discussions at the university and a lot of industries as well. I work with a team of researchers at the Center for the Future of Work at the University of Pretoria. The center was established just over a year ago in response to a global need that for augmented and synchronized research on work's evolving landscape, an acute emphasis on Africa's unique context. In partnership with a diverse array of experts, we're sculpting a forward-looking perspective on work. Our approach emphasizes collaborative creation, ensuring that we incorporate insights from every stakeholder, be it an individual, a team, an entire organization, or the wider community. Leveraging cutting-edge academic methodologies and practical insights, we collaborate with a vast network to derive actionable strategies to address the upcoming shifts in the employment arena. Our journey thus far has commissioned several studies already on the future of work, and we've established invaluable connections with global industrial and academic leaders to deepen our exploration in this domain. But before we begin to unravel this complex landscape of the future of work, I invite you to envisage your own professional horizon. Close your eyes just for a second and picture yourself at your desk. Now fast forward a decade to 2033. How does your workspace appear? Observe the evolution of your desk. Is it populated by more gadgets or perhaps a stack of books? Have traditional screens and tablets given way to immersive VR headsets? Contemplate the location of your office. Is it nested in a basement, perhaps atop a skyscraper, or set against the serene backdrop of a coastal shoreline? Reflect on the significance of geographic boundaries. Is it essential to be in the same region or even the same country as your organization? Now consider the nature of the tasks you'll do at this desk. How much of your work has been assumed by AI? Is Bart managing your email correspondence? Is Claude overseeing your financial projections? Perhaps ChatGPT is distilling your essential reports for you. Most crucially, ask yourself, how much influence do you possess in shaping this envisaged future? Now come back to 2023, open your eyes, and unfortunately it's still me here giving you the speech. Okay? But I'll promise to be short. The future of work is not a new idea. Work has been continuously changing throughout history. The most severe changes of work occur because of industrial revolutions, and we're living in one of these moments right now. Far-reaching changes in technology, climate, and global economic integration are transforming the world of work in ways that we do not fully understand. However, following the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become not only a major discourse in all aspects of life, but a central pillar in government policy worldwide. The pandemic has mainstreamed a range of terms for how we work in a post-COVID world. Hybrid working, remote working, co-working are just some of the artifacts that have traveled from the future of work to the now. Allow us to address these changes as early as possible, mitigating important problems before they occur. We need to explore the future of work more actively than before. Seen in this manner, the future of work is a projection of how work, working, workers, and the workplace will evolve in the years ahead from the perspective of different actors in society, influenced by technological, socio-economic, political, and demographic changes. We recognize Africa's economy is evolving rapidly as it blends efforts to catch up with these new nuances of work that are taking place. We know that this will inevitably alter the nature of work in our environment, creating new opportunities and engendering new threats. While the scope of this topic may span a myriad of captivating dimensions, my limited time this morning does not allow me to indulge them all. Nonetheless, I am eager to share certain pivotal considerations regarding the future of work that I trust will enrich your strategic pursuits. The first, and notably the most worthy for your consideration, is the shift in skills demanded by the future of work. According to the Institute of the Future, 85% of jobs that today's students will hold by 2030 have not yet been created. In South Africa, this reality is underscored by a recent slight improvement in the graduate unemployment rate, which dropped from 10.6 in the first quarter of this year to 9.6 in the second quarter. This change is set against the backdrop of rapidly evolving technologies like mobile and cloud computing, the Internet of Things, and AI. CEOs are increasingly concerned about the need for a skilled workforce that can adapt to automation. The concept of a future-fit employees is gaining traction, emphasizing seamless transition from education to employment to ensure today's skills meet tomorrow's demands. Success in the modern workplace hinges on a set of core skills that are universally applicable across various sectors and occupations. These core skills encompass communication, social emotional intelligence, digital literacy, and mental flexibility. In South Africa, employees express concern over the proficiency levels in these skills among both employees and new hires. The current landscape for skill development is fragmented, involving more than just educational institutions. A flexible education system will be crucial in keeping pace with the changing technologies to ensure that workers have the skills to complement machines and not be replaced by them. The labor market is increasingly valuing soft skills, which include interpersonal relationships, leadership, communication, conflict resolution, teamwork, and time management. While there is no universal definition for soft skills, their importance is universally acknowledged. Initiatives are in progress to standardize the teaching, assessment, and recognition of these skills with post-secondary education and workplace training. The swift changes in economic landscapes accelerated by the pandemic have laid bare significant skills gaps in various populations. The transition to remote work and online learning has spotlighted crucial digital skills deficiencies. Employees indicate that these skills gaps pose a substantial barrier to technological adoption and productivity growth.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
My next point I want to raise is to talk about automation. Automation has taken a leap forward with recent introduction of generative AI tools. Now, generative refers to the fact that these tools can identify patterns across enormous sets of data and generate new content, an ability that has often been considered uniquely human. The most striking advance is in the natural language capabilities, which are required for a large number of work activities. While ChatGPT is focused on text, other AI systems from major platforms can generate images, video, and audio. Generative AI holds immense potential for business across various sectors. It can write code, design products, formulate marketing strategies, optimize operations, analyze legal documents, and even facilitate scientific research. Currently, these AI systems are most effective when used in conjunction with human oversight, reflecting their stage of development. The implications for the future of work, particularly in Africa and South Africa, are profound. Automation is set to impact a broader range of tasks that require expertise, human interaction, and creativity. The timeline for automation adoption is likely to accelerate significantly. For context, without generative AI, it was estimated that automation would account for 21% of work hours in the US economy by 2030. With generative AI, that figure jumps up to 30%. As we focus on equipping learners with essential skills like literacy, numeracy, and digital proficiency, the quality of education content and delivery methods becomes crucial. Generative AI is not just a technological advancement, it is a pivotal factor that will shape the future of work in Africa. One needs to also consider what the future of work will do in terms of growing inequality. Sub-Saharan Africa grapples with uncertainties in the future of work. It faces unique challenges. The region's population is projected to surge from 1 billion to 1.7 billion by 2040, adding an average of 20 million people to the working age population each year for the next 2 decades. This demographic boom coincides with rapid urbanization, intensifying demand on urban employment, while the region has managed to add an average of 9 million jobs per year since 2000. Most of these have been in low productivity sectors, such as subsistence agriculture, low-value services, with self-employment remaining the norm. Where will our future jobs come from? The evolving landscape poses risks for workers in low-wage jobs, particularly with less education and women. These groups are overrepresented in sectors like office support and customer service, which are vulnerable to automation and other technological changes. As we focus on upskilling, it is crucial to target these vulnerable populations to prevent a rollback of the progress we've made so far. However, there is a silver lining. Unlike advanced economies which are facing technological shifts amid declining working populations, Sub-Saharan Africa's challenge is different. With a rapidly growing workforce, the region has the opportunity to harness this human capital to meet the demands of the future. Specifically in South Africa and other countries in the region, the focus should be on creating high-value jobs that leverage this demographic advantage. The future of work in Africa is a complex interplay between demographic shifts, technological advancements, and the urgent need to target educational and employment strategies. Addressing these challenges is not just a matter of economic necessity, but a pivotal factor in shaping the continent's future, which can make the necessary changes and own the workforce of tomorrow, or we can have these jobs realized somewhere else. This leads me to my last point I would like you to consider. Skills migration. So skills are no longer confined by geographical borders. The acceleration of remote work spurred by technological advancements will have enabled talent to migrate digitally, if not physically as well. We already see an increase in digital nomadism, where skilled workers are not restricted to one location but are contributing to global economies virtually. However, this digital migration of skills presents a double-edged sword. On one hand, it opens the opportunities for talent from less developed regions to participate in the global jobs market, while on the other hand, it may exacerbate the brain drain problem, where local economies lose their most skilled workers to more attractive international markets. The issue of skills migration is not new to Africa, and particularly South Africa. These workers are often highly skilled and trained within the country, driven by factors beyond just salary, and are less likely to return. The exodus of skilled labor exacerbates existing skills gaps, with implications for productivity, economic growth, and social equity. The continent stands at a crossroads. It can either become a hub for next-generation talent or continue to export it. To retain skilled workers, it's crucial to align educational output and upskilling programs with industries poised for growth. More effective we are at this, the less likely we are to lose talent overseas. In South Africa, the formal sector accounts for nearly 70% of total employment. Retention of skilled labor is not just a governmental issue. Employers have a critical role to play. Companies, in addition, must drive as much temporal and locational autonomy for their workers, invest in continuous learning, and bolster employee well-being and mental health. So, we've discussed the systemic shift in skills, the transformative power of automation, and the challenges and opportunities presented by our demographic landscape, and the critical issue around skills migration. These are not isolated phenomena, but interconnected facets of a complex ecosystem which we call the future of work. Let's not forget that the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something that we have the power to shape. We stand at this pivotal moment. We have two paths before us, one that leads to a future where Africa, and particularly South Africa, becomes a global hub for next generation talent, and another where we continue to lose our brightest minds. The choice we make today in education, industry alignment, and social policy will determine which path we take. As you take on today's very interesting discussions, I would like to leave you with a quote from Peter Drucker, which says, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." Thank you.
Prof, if you could just stay behind. Prof, if you could just stay behind for a second. I just want to check if there are any questions coming in from the audience. Do you have any questions? We do have mics coming through. However, I do want to do one thing. Remember, in the beginning of your presentation, you asked people to imagine 10 years from now, 2033, and their setup and what has changed and what has not changed. And the thing is that we saw people close their eyes, and then at the end, when you told them to open their eyes, they did. But I'm going to put people on the spot. I'm going to can we have a mic that we do? I'm going to pick anybody, and they're going to tell us what they saw and what changed, because I want to know what's in front of your desk right now, and when you did that exercise what changed. So let me see, who am I going to find in the audience, provided that your eyes were closed. So that's the only way we're going to know that you were actually doing it. Okay, so let's see. So we do have a mic, or do you want me to use this one? Oh, we have one. Okay, great. We will go for the gentleman who is looking at me with the hat and the glasses. I want to know the question that you asked. What's in front of your desk right now, and how do you imagine your work has changed in 10 years? Like, do you have more gadgets? Do you have more books?
Amazingly, I went back and forward.
Okay.
So our family business date for 130 years. So we, in fact, introduced mobile in Mauritius in 1989, where there was a population of 800,000. So that was not really a business, if you look at, but the thought that was behind it. So when I was sitting here, when he said 10 years, again, it was the same thing. So when we're talking today, what we're talking about technology and all that, so that will be the future.
Yeah.
Either executive or below. So that's what I've seen, that there was more technology, we were using more of those, and there will be more people sitting somewhere doing something for growth.
Okay.
So
Let's hear
that's
from
what
the
I-
ladies. The lady over here with the blue blazer and beige pants.
Morning, everyone. I actually didn't see my office.
Okay.
I was not in an office, and I had a gadget and giving instructions, and things were just happening. I was actually not at my office. I didn't see my office exist anymore.
That's quite
I thought
interesting.
everyone is working from wherever they choose to work.
I wonder if anyone else had the same image. Were you in a hybrid space? Were you working in the office? Anyone else who wants to share what? Well, I'm going to pick the victim if someone doesn't share their story. The gentleman over there.
Morning, everyone. So I had quite a technological leap forward.
Okay.
I saw myself sitting on the beach using AI, Neuralink, lenses, working, doing what I do for a living, and far away from the office, like in the Maldives or something.
Beach. That's not a bad setup. Prof, what do you make of the responses that you got in the room in terms of where people were seeing what they're doing now versus, I suppose, going back, also like the gentleman, what he did, and then going forward?
Well, I think the most interesting thing is to see how much influence you think you have over that reality. Some of us will sit here and we will believe that our employer has the influence to make that a reality and how much control they have over that. But a lot of the newer generations are coming through and they're not giving the employer that ability to control that future. They're taking control of that future. We're seeing it with the gig economy, where people don't want an employment contract. They want to contract work, and they want to create their own environments and work where they want to work. So it's a reality that's coming a lot faster than we think, and employers have less control over it than they think they do. So we can either harness that and make your employment environment more flexible, adopt more remote work, look at the employment contract structures, or we can sit and we can lose that talent to companies that are more progressive. So yeah, very, very nice comments. I like the idea of not having an office a lot, and I think
like
it's
the
a lot
beach.
closer than we think.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Prof. Let me grab that mic for you. I think someone will help you with that. Awesome. Okay, so we got that very interesting presentation, and I think some of the aspects that the Prof did mention in his talk, we are going to be hearing it filter through in this part of the discussion. So this one is going to be looking at building a future fit workforce. We're going to try and understand what does that mean in 2023, but also try to understand how do you retain staff? How do you reskill? Especially you find that there are instances where when you talk about reskilling, it brings elements of fear because people don't know, are you reskilling because we're going to be restructuring, and does that mean that I've got a place within the organization, or does that mean that my future may be somewhere else? And the future is scary, especially when we don't know how all of these things are going to affect us. But also, I think in the Q&A discussions between the audience that is watching us virtually and those who are in the room, I would actually like to hear your experiences when it comes to what the Prof spoke about when it comes to remote work and hybrid work. Has it been easy or difficult to convince your team that you don't want to work in the office anymore and you'd rather come in twice a week as opposed to the 5 days of the week that most people probably did pre-COVID? So these are some of the things we are going to be talking about: talent acquisition, development, retention, and how all of these emerging technologies are reshaping the work processes. So I'm going to welcome the two individuals that I'm going to be having a conversation with. And with us in the room, we are going to be joined by Tony Vicente, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Adept IT. And as he walks onto stage, I'll just read a little bit about him. He was appointed the Chief Strategy Officer of Adept IT in September 2018, and over the years, his role has changed from Chief Strategy Officer to Chief Operating Officer. Thank you so much, Tony. If you can have a seat.
Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause. Great.
Good morning.
And I like this one because we're talking about, hybrid and connecting remotely. And we actually do have one of our panelists connecting remotely. And I promise we did not have this all planned. It just worked out the way that it did. And this one is Prof. Kumbulani Mpofu. He is the Professor of Industrial Engineering at the Tshwane University of Technology. And a little bit about him: he is the Gibela Research Chair in Manufacturing and Skills Development. And he is a NRF-rated researcher with a passion for industrial engineering. So the Prof is going to be joining us shortly. We should be able to see him on screen, and there he is. Prof, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's see if he can hear us. I think he's on mute. Is he? Yes, no. Prof, are you on mute? Let's see what happens when you unmute yourself.
Prof, I'm not
so
doing
I'm
this by
not sure if you
myself.
can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Fantastic.
Okay, great.
Good morning to you with the audience. Unfortunately, I cannot be there today, but I guess technology is helping.
And as I was telling the audience, it just worked out in a very interesting way. So thank you so much for emphasizing this idea of remote work, which I'm really enjoying. So we are going to get into the actual meat of the conversation. And as I mentioned, it's about looking at what a future fit workforce entails. And if there's anything that comes to mind during this particular discussion, please have your questions on standby. We are going to open the floor after the panel discussion, and this includes for those who are watching us virtually. So, Tony, let me start off with you. I mean, you caught a bit of what the Prof was saying. And it now brings me to the question that with all of these changes, with everything that's happening with ChatGPT, technology, AI, automation, when you go back to basics, do you get a sense that we truly understand what is happening around us? Or are we all just moving and feeling our way through the dark, and those who get it, and those who don't try and play catch up?
Well, thank you for following a professor who does this full-time researching workforce dynamics. It's great. I'm going to apply a bit more maybe a pragmatic approach, not a research approach. We're in an interesting place. It reminds me of COVID when it started. Really, no one knew what we were facing. It was a brand new thing. And today, we see organizations, including ours, facing this tsunami of change and struggling to find how to prioritize the strategic initiatives balancing technology and operating models, etc., and finding this path in this constant change, which is the constant, but it's obviously moving a lot faster. I believe that the real challenge that we've got is that this change that we face, which is driven by technology, people associate that with a tagline to say it's disruptive technology. Disruptive technology, AI, is going to take 30% of our workforce away. It's possible. But there's a balancing thought in the way we think about our workforce and the way that shapes our decisions, is that technology by itself is not disruptive. It's new business models that change the status quo which become disruptive. So can I give an example of that?
Sure.
So when we have an emerging need in the market, let's use the example of people looking for cheaper, more personalized holiday accommodation. And we have now technology that allows us to share assets between people and to provide a whole different experience because there's these technology platforms and there's enough innovation to rethink a total business model and create an Airbnb. That rethought business model is what really becomes disruptive. So where am I going with this? It is true that technology frightens because we cannot fully understand yet the full impact of where this is going. But I think what becomes clear is that the critical skill that we need today is customer centricity and innovation. Because it's at that confrontation of technology, emerging market needs, the ability to bring this together, conceptualize a new solution, where it really starts to provoke the thing that frightens us, which is disrupting our existence, disrupting our organizations, the way they work, and impacting on the workforce.
Prof, let me come to you here. I mean, the reality on the ground, how are you seeing it? Because you also had a very interesting point, because you also are interacting with students. And as I mentioned, part of this discussion is about those skills and where we go and what the future of work is going to look like. But what are you seeing on the ground in terms of all of these changes?
So, from the work that we're doing, we are realizing that partnerships are becoming more and more critical. And this is why I'm joining the interview online, because I'm looking for partnerships in Africa. I'm actually in Rwanda, Kigali. We've got an AfriLabs workshop that is taking place, where we are being motivated to do education in an unconventional way and look at education from a different perspective. And practically back in South Africa, we have established at the Tshwane University of Technology the Institute for the Future of Work, which is a precipitation of years of effort where we've sought to embed entrepreneurial approaches to how we educate our students and practically take them through those experiences through engagement with like-minded partners. And a particular example that I want to give there is a GIGS project that was given to us by an industry partner. And the project was executed by students in collaboration with other partners who are in the industry. And students learned how to do real industrial work that is being utilized in the industry space in real time, so that there is no gap between the education effort that is taking place in the class and what they then practically experience later on. And it speaks exactly to what Tony speaks about in terms of the technologies for leisure. Our involving our students in this kind of real problems to solve for the assignments rather than giving them fictitious setups will ensure that they are ready to deal with the future changes that we're looking forward to having. And we are grateful that we have such partners who are able to take along with us in the work we do.
Prof, that's quite interesting, and we'll come back to that in terms of the work you're doing, but also how do we, take things to the next level, especially when we bring in the learning institutions in forming those partnerships with the private sector. Tony, let me come to you here. I mean, you mentioned that it's a complex landscape. Lots of things are changing, but I want to come to you as your role as the Chief Operating Officer at Adept IT. What are some of the challenges that you may have seen where companies are grappling with all of this? And I suppose from your perspective as well, let's draw from your experience at Adept IT. What are you saying?
So we talk about workforce, and I would say the very few companies would not admit that they're struggling to unify the workforce. Okay. So we spoke about the new ways of communicating. I mean, it is truly unbelievable, right? We communicate in a far more seamless way. We can access talent all over the world. We can work from the beach. I hope my guys are not working from the beach, but they can work from the beach. So, I mean, there's an e-learning, the ability to access knowledge at any time, for any problem. It's an amazing thing. But here's the things we're really still trying to figure out. People are social animals. We need to belong to tribes. Tribes have a certain set of behaviors. Our best way to learn behaviors is through observation. Our children learn from us by observing what we do, and this is just the strongest form of learning. It's really difficult to drive development of new talent remotely. Development of new talent in an environment where you have very little touch points with one another in that perspective. It's not to say you can't mentor. I believe that unifying a workforce means people need to be mentored or be mentored somebody. That's the true fiber of an organization. And it's not that you can't do it over a two-dimensional screen. I just think it's far more difficult. So people have innate behaviors. I'm going to make another example of COVID. I don't know, COVID for me is one of these things that spurred so much of this change. I remember during COVID a couple of experts, many experts in fact, saying, we will never fly again. This idea of being stuck in a flying suppository with thousands of people, breathing their germs onto us, to go and have meetings around the world, it's gone. It's gone forever. I'm on a plane tonight. It's packed. You cannot travel anywhere. People still need to behave in certain ways which are just innate to our behavior. So I think that this is where what we're grappling with. We're grappling with the blend of new technologies, the advantages it brings to us, with some of this human dynamic, unifying our workforce, retaining our talent, making sure they're not poached internationally, and ultimately to drive that human connect.
Yeah. I want to put you on the spot here. And on the idea of remote work, I mean, it works for some companies and some companies it may not, especially if it's a company whose work culture is reliant on those strong personal or interpersonal relationships in the office, high levels of engagement, etc. Somebody, strong candidate, is in front of you in an interviewing process. He or she makes it to the end. They tick off all your boxes. The only thing they say is that I want to work remotely. What do you do with that? Is that a deal breaker for you? He or she ticks all your boxes. They are who you are. You basically, it's a perfect fit for Adept IT. The only thing is, I don't want to come into the office.
No, it's a challenge of every day. Every day we find that challenge.
You hire them? Is it a go, or you just...
We do.
Okay.
We do. At this point in time, we do. I would say that in some professions, we have developers, for example.
Right.
They really can be extremely effective working not on the beach, but just about anywhere.
This beach thing is going to be...
Yeah, but it stuck with me. And so we do absolutely do hybrid work. We don't enforce back to office, but I can't say that's a closed topic. It's every day we see pros and cons to that decision.
Yeah. Prof, I mean, we talk a lot about the learning institutions, and it's quite easy to be talking about a lot of these changes and say, well, what are the universities doing? What are the TVETs doing and the colleges? Without understanding perhaps some of your challenges on the ground. I mean, you spoke about the need for partnerships, but let's take it back a little bit here. What challenges are you experiencing at a university level in terms of trying to help us with the skills gap in preparing our learners for this future that we're talking about?
So I just want to concur that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Prof, you still with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Super. I just want to concur with Tony that I think there are professions where it works perfectly to be remote. But for example, as you can see with my logo, I'm into transport manufacturing, and obviously I train engineers who work in this context. So there's no way you're going to make a physical product virtually, right? Even if you've got robots running your factory, you will need some degree of presence of people to be involved in the process. So in our educating the young people, we need to prepare them for both worlds. We need to prepare them for the world where they need to come and hold things. For example, the JIG project that I spoke about earlier on, we can't teach you how to build things, especially from a manufacturing perspective, when you're virtual, right? And even with the educational institutions that generally run a mode of online learning, or they are understood to be distance learning, when it comes to areas of education like engineering, they need to have some hands-on part of, the work they're doing. And this is very important because at the end of the day, they are going to work in a physical factory. The planes that Tony was speaking about, that he's going to be jumping onto later on today, somebody needs to make it. And so our students need to understand both worlds. And we are doing that because at the same time, we're teaching our students through virtual reality means. So we've developed quite a lot of content, which we have been exploring partnerships with TVETs on how we can deploy these at TVETs. And particularly because what we find is that some of the TVETs cannot afford some of the infrastructure to train their workforces or their students on specific kind of techniques. And the only thing they would do is read a book. So rather than read a book, being immersed in a virtual reality environment will give you a far better experience, not that it replaces the actual physical training, but there are some professions where things can happen online, like for example, where it's maybe a lot of software work that needs to be done. You can program from anywhere. That shouldn't be a challenge because there isn't much physical things to deal with. But even in those instances where you need to program, sometimes you need to see how the program behaves, and you need to get in touch with the physical world. So we can't be hard and fast about. Now we are moving away from a physical world and becoming totally virtual in some contexts, but at some point, that mentorship, that engagement, this is why I'm in Rwanda. If this this virtual setup was a solution, I wouldn't have come to Rwanda. But it's not a solution, and I've managed to get in touch with people that I wouldn't have got in contact with if I was just joining for a specific slot online. So for me, that also speaks to how we're educating our young people and preparing them for the future of work that is before us.
What more do we need to be doing? Because a lot of the times when I engage with a lot of the corporates, they say that they can't find the skills. And then when I have engagements at certain events with, say, the Minister of Higher Education, he says, well, the graduates are there. It's just that sometimes the corporates are not rethinking their recruitment processes. They tend to look at the bigger universities for these skills, and they're leaving those who are in the vocational space out of the conversation or out of that recruitment pipeline. How do we change the mind shift here when it comes to involving a lot more of the corporates who are looking for these skills of the future and connecting them with the vocational institutions? Have you given some thought on how we can change that?
we've gone beyond giving thought, because for us, we've actually engaged with partners. And this is why I always will go back to the partnership thing, because I think we need to, maybe there's a line that we need to delete. The line between this is you're in academia, you're being educated, and the line of being in, actual practical work. I think we need to delete that line in the future of preparing young people for the future of work, because that's where the problem starts. The educators who are educating these young people are not up to speed with what is taking place in the industry, and then already there's a gap there. But if organizations can also open up their doors without necessarily giving contracts to young people to come and get experience, but allowing young people, while they're still studying, to get some exposure in their workplaces. And I'm not sure how my fellow panelist, Tony, is doing that in his organization. But before they get their degree or before they get their diploma, that they can spend time understanding what is actually happening, whether they during their breaks or during their 2 weeks, that organizations can open up their doors and say, you know what, we want to partner with universities that are training people along these lines, and make sure that there's exposure, not just for the students, but also for the people who educate them. Because sometimes there's also that gap that you've been in the university for 20 years and you celebrate that and you forget that I'm not in touch with the industry. And this is why for us, an approach where we're making sure that not only the students go to the industry, but also when our lecturers do projects, they go to industries where they can be involved in understanding what is actually happening on the ground, so that can be translated into knowledge and can be translated into an understanding of how this evolution around knowledge is taking place in the context of, preparing our educational institutions. Because for me, it's not just about preparing the students, it's also preparing the academic institutions themselves. Because sometimes even the way the academic institutions are configured is not fit for the dynamic future of work. And that's a conversation that we must have, because if we don't speak about the static nature of how universities have been operating and how they are not dynamic and how they are not agile, then we're not helping the student, because that hierarchical system continues to give challenges to the kind of graduate that we take out. And then Tony on the other side says, the students that are coming out from this university, they're not prepared for the future of work. They're not prepared to actually come and work here in my organization, because there's a disconnect and there's a line that has been drawn. But if we delete those lines, that will help a lot in taking us forward all. Thank you.
Tony, I'm going to now put you on the spot here based on what he said. In fixing that disconnect, does your institution or your organization allow students to come in and do a bit of shadowing, learn on the job, 2 weeks here or a couple of months, even while you're studying? What is your approach then to that recruitment process?
So we invest at the rural school level already in helping school education around technology be stronger. And so we have a number of schools that we support, and we develop their talent with the view of bringing those students through to our graduate program. We have a very robust graduate program, and we've said it, we have a skills deficit in the country. So we invest heavily in graduates, in students to develop their skills and to create a future workforce for ourselves, and obviously some of it into the market. I would like to comment something for the Prof. The strategy we have found to retain talent in this world, we don't have all the answers, but one of the things we think and believe really have a big impact is to drive a learning culture in an organization. It's very difficult to equip anyone, even at university, for the future of their careers. We just heard that 10 years' time, it looks completely different. So our response is that you must drive and foster a culture of learning. And we belong to a global group that has the same culture, and we motivate for people to share their knowledge as much as possible. Teaching is the best form of learning in a way as well. And I believe that, and we do a lot of work also with universities, I believe that partnership, being part of organizational constructs of continuous learning in the workforce, is something that could maybe get rid of some of those lines and help organizations retain talent. I believe South Africa particularly, there's a big appetite for development. of talent. So this is how we've approached it.
Let me stay with you for this one, and then I'll get the thoughts from the Prof. When it comes to that continuous learning, it leads me into the thought around reskilling. How open are the adept IT team, or perhaps even when you have engagements with other organizations and they tell you a little bit of feedback about how they're working with their staff? How easy or difficult is it to bring on the idea of reskilling? Is reskilling scary for staff, especially when you're saying, well, you know, your job might not exist and we are reskilling you for a job that is yet to be? Because we found that there was a bit of friction, especially when you look at the banking industry. People couldn't grapple with the idea that there'll be fewer branches and you'll be engaging online. And internally, when you spoke to the banks, they were like, well, we have to reskill our staff. So, you know, if you had a division that used to clear checks, they have to be reskilled and moved to different parts of the bank, and then others will find other opportunities elsewhere because they've moved up to the next level. Is it difficult to convince staff to say you need to be reskilled? How do they accept that?
I would say if you get to a point where you're facing a sudden reskilling, you're in trouble already.
Okay.
And our response will be, and going back to the first point I made, is you have to be constantly reskilling. So the biggest drive we have is to drive a culture of customer centricity. If we understand, in fact, we go further. We survey what is happening to our customers' customers. Okay. Understanding what is happening to our customers' environments in terms of changing their landscapes, the impact of technology, etc., helps us understand what our customers need, and in turn to bring this back home and make sure that our solutions remain relevant, our skills remain relevant, etc. And that must drive a continuous learning, a continuous reskilling. So I just find that if you find yourself at a point where you all of a sudden have a whole group of people that are not fit for purpose, so to speak, for what you need to do, you're in trouble already.
Prof, your thoughts on reskilling. Is there still a skepticism around it, and how do you approach it if perhaps it brings in thoughts of fear amongst your staff when you tell them about reskilling and new skills of the future?
So I want to use our experience as a practical example. I alluded earlier on to the fact that we've established the Institute of the Future of Work. It was launched, I think, 2022, 2021. It was launched at our university, which is not so long back. But what I want to emphasize is that it wasn't an overnight journey. One department in our university, for years, I think since 2013, was trying to find a configuration of reducing the unemployment rate by ensuring that we have an entrepreneurial approach to our education, as I indicated earlier on, and finding the right partners to do that. You know, so the arrival of the Institute of the Future of Work has then happened because on a continuous basis, even amongst the academic staff, we've been continuously and systematically having platforms of engagement where we reflect about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and change the way we're looking at things. And this is why today we have a building that the university has bought so that the Institute of the Future of Work can carry out its activities there. We have various laboratories that are technology-driven, that are not ideas from blue sky by the university, but are driven by needs from the industry. So if there are industry people in the room today, there are technology spaces that are available for them to say, you know what, this is where we see our industry going. And we want to get our hands dirty with the students, with the university professors, and develop solutions, technological or otherwise, as Tony has mentioned, that reskilling is continuous. we've got tools that we are utilizing at the moment to help people understand the fourth industrial revolution, not from a very artificial basis, but from a gamified perspective, because the other way of learning now is also playing games. And in particular with these technological things where people have fear of the technology is going to take our jobs, engaging them through a continuous learning process, through a gamified learning approach, which is not the conventional way that, it's not the conventional way that we are taught. At least for me when I was at university. Now we are utilizing it to teach our students because we reflected backwards and realized that when we were young, all of us were playing mommy and daddy. No one in the room here, even amongst your audience, can say they didn't play mommy and daddy. All of us did, and through that, there was some learning that took place in that gamification of whatever was taking place when we're toddlers, right? Suddenly, when we're older, we begin to think that the only way for us to learn is to sit in a classroom, have a desk, and maybe dream a bit about how that's going to evolve in the future, etc. And it ends there. It can't. It's amazing the amount of learning that we found, not just only with our students, because we take this gamified learning approach with the industry, either as an activity to break the ice at their strategic sessions, and then help them think about the fourth industrial revolution and what it implies for their business, and have metrics that then measure what will ultimately take place. And for me, through this gamified learning approach, what I've also seen is that it's a beautiful opportunity for people from different perspectives, because it includes everyone from the tech side, from the social side, from the HR side, and even from the leadership side, where people can engage in a gamified setup and learn about what technologies are coming up, understand how these technologies relate to each other, because most of the times there's excitement about drones, but no one knows how those drones link to the other elements around the technologies that are being developed, because drones are not the only technologies that are being developed. But if there is a gamified learning approach where everybody gets a broad understanding of all these things, then it helps them get a sense of, how does what I do on a daily basis need to transform as new technologies come into place and the reskilling process becomes continuous, as Tony has alluded.
Tony, we've been talking about students, we've been talking about young people. Where do the older, mature generation fit in here, and what does their participation look like in this world? Your thoughts?
So I'm going to take a slight angle on what you just asked me
Okay.
now, because you're pushing me into dangerous ground, right? Let's talk about leadership. If you
Okay.
talk about the older,
Sure.
let's say, so if we can generalize and say that the older generation in most organizations would be in management or leadership roles. That's again an area that I can't tell you we have an answer, but we're certainly grappling with the thoughts. Two things really challenge leadership going into the future. One is that data-driven decision-making is one of the biggest derivatives of this new technology. We've spoken about automation, big data, AI, all this thing comes together in data-driven decision-making. And this is a big, big thing already today in business. And so the question is, then do we need experience? Do we need people that are older who bring a bit of gray hair and experience from the past to solve for problems of today? The other one is that the organizational construct is flattening with this new workforce model. The way people communicate, etc., the typical tree hierarchical structures are dismantling and are becoming flatter. So the question then is, what does leadership look like going forward? What does the future for more experienced people look like going forward? Are they fit for this future? And we consider a few things in that. We don't have the answers, but we think about it this following way. Leadership in providing a motivational future vision for staff and a strategy on how to get there, fortunately still remains a human endeavor. So I think that still remains the primary element of leadership, giving people belief in the future, that they're in good hands, their careers are in a sound place, and we know how we're going to achieve the success in the future. So I think that still remains the domain of experience. So there is a future for people with some experience. What has changed, and decision-making is never absolute in just a set of data. There's a context, obviously, that we have to always take into account. consequences of decisions coming from data also need to be taken into account. But what we are saying is, and to the topics already raised, new communication skills, new abilities to drive innovation, to create platforms for people to experiment with new technologies in a way that doesn't create a massive collapse, but gives us the benefit of learning, and themselves being open to continuous learning all the time. So I think the older generation, whether it is in continuing growth, whether it is in self-development, still have a role to play.
Not off the hook yet. I'm going to come back to that older generation question. But we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to open up the floor for questions. As I can see on my screen, we don't have any questions online, but we'll take some questions in the room. We still have the microphones moving around. So if you have a question, if you could stand up and tell us who your question is directed to, either to the Prof or to Tony, and then we'll take the responses from there. So any questions? Come on, don't be shy. Okay, there we are.
Thanks. So one of the things that seem interesting to me is it seems like we have a choice when we employ these people. But the fact of the matter is, if you're in high technological areas, our skill shortage is so severe that we've got people that come to our offices that we're trying to interview, and the first question that they ask is whether the role is fully remote or not. And if you say, well, it's sort of a combined role, they exclude you as an employer. It's almost like the roles have changed. We're no longer interviewing employees or potential employees, they're interviewing us. And I think that's quite an interesting dynamic to deal with when you desperately need skill. I think the other thing that the Prof mentioned is if we look at, for example, getting skill from universities to come and interact with our teams, etc., it's quite a complex thing to do because, you know, if you approach technology incorrectly, you could actually damage an entire program or a customer experience as a result of that. So that balance is also quite difficult to maintain. So, yeah, I guess my question is, you know, if you also found that employees are interviewing you as opposed to you having the upper hand, and how do you deal with that?
Tony?
So we face this every day. It's I would almost divorce technology for a moment from the dynamics that we face, particularly in South Africa. We have a severe skills shortage. And in any environment, when you have a severe skills shortage, then the workforce starts to dictate their terms to some extent. And so you are forced to adopt that. And so, as I said to you, we grapple with this every single day, and we have maintained a very flexible work environment as a consequence of attracting the best talent in the ways we can. So that's definitely not going away. But there's a couple of flip sides to that. Not just as DAPT, but our broader organization invest heavily in learning, continuous learning. Part of that crazy investment, we actually pay a lot of money to put people on planes to get them in a massive conference and hire out the whole venue and put everyone together for a week to share lessons from one another. The feedback is outstanding. People absolutely gravitate and love this thing. And I cannot help but, you know, to say to myself privately, this is not happening virtually, guys. This is in person. This is why you're enjoying it so much. So I guess there's a way that you bring talent into the building, and then there's a way where that in turn starts to change in itself. And if I may just add one last thing about that we're finding super difficult with recruitment, is the element of ethics. Has just become far more acute in this world of today. The way we operate remotely, the way we have access to generative AI that can do things in the background, etc. What we find is while we have fantastic tools to streamline the recruitment and user psychometrics, everything online, and it's all filtered, you know, way before it gets to us, the thing we're still struggling with is making sure we hire the people with the right cultural fit, and the right ethics. Skills, we can always put on top. And of course, I've mixed up a little bit the high developed skill force from the rest, but it's a complicated situation.
Before we get to that, I just want to quickly get to this one that is online, but we'll come back to you. And this one is for Adapt IT again, so you're going to be on the spot here. And the question reads, what is Adapt IT's approach to justifying roles to employees which require the staff to be present in the office full-time against those who work remotely or hybrid?
So that's a very good question. We have a very federated organizational construct because our business delivers vertical market software solutions. And so consequently, our organizational structures would mirror that which our clients require. And so in some industries, certain skills require full-time presence. And where that's not required, that's not applied. So I would believe that the people who apply for roles that require a different type of operational model would understand it because they are servicing a specific industry, doing a very specific job that requires an in-person presence. Otherwise, we wouldn't impose that on them.
Okay. Did you want to have a...
Yes, if I can ask a follow-up question, I'd love to know how you and your team build a business case where if you're going to apply new technologies and disruptive engagements, how for example, you know, part of that engagement is the fact that IT is going to replace roles. And in South Africa, you know, when you start building that business case around reducing salaries in order to prove the business case for technology, it becomes quite a sensitive topic. And I mean, we speak about reskilling, but in many instances, you do have elder people that still have a book and that's how they prefer to write. And it's difficult to convince them of change. Or on the lower end, you've got people that might not have the ability to upskill into a new role, and yet you're using technology to justify, or using the reduced cost of employees and therefore buildings, operational cost, etc., to justify new technology. How do you guys deal with that?
Okay.
I told you.
No, that's a good question. I'm going to try and answer it with a few thoughts because it's such a complex question. The first is I'm going to go back to technology is not disruptive, in my perspective. It's business models. And it's actually very difficult to disrupt a business model. Industries tend to migrate towards best practice. In fact, most technology solutions come baked with best practice templates on top of it because over many, many years, the industries have moved to this norm. And so a lot, what we don't see it, but a lot of attempts to disrupt business models fail. Okay? But they happen. The Ubers and they do happen. They're there. So I think let's just take away for a second the fact that technology is as disruptive as such. I think technology in the main augments, improves, drives efficiency. Let me make an analogy. I hope it won't be too off. So today my toothbrush rotates by itself, but I still brush my teeth the same way. No one's yet convinced me to brush my teeth from behind my back. You know, maybe one day, but not yet. So I think we try all the time to emphasize innovation, customer centricity, this all the time, how to do things better all the time. And so look at technology, how to make things better as opposed to take away. Right? So yes, it's true. We might not grow a workforce as fast as we did in the past because in making current workforce more efficient, we don't need to bring in as many heads as we did in the past. That's true. And the last point I would say, new tech. We look at it through trial, experiments, creating an environment which is safe for people to do small experiments. Bring in Gen AI, add it to your tool, see how it works, trial this, trial that, but in small contained experiments that if they fail, it's fine. If they work out, the business case becomes automatic. So that, I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
Prof, I'm going to come to you here. There is a question that I think you can answer, and it's come through via the online space. And the question says, where do you rank the development of critical thinking skills? Is this something that the universities need to prioritize in their curriculum, or do you think that this is contextualized in the work environment?
So thank you so much for the question to the online person who has shared the question. But I just want to take a step back, and I think there was a question that was directed to me about students interacting with teams in industry or in workspaces. I think that's a very important thing that we need to address. We are not saying that, and I think Tony indirectly has addressed it, because he spoke about how we implement new technology, create a safe working space, right? If we can create a safe working space for technology, why can we not create a safe working space for students who come from universities, so that at the end of the day, they don't negatively impact the client who the organization is serving, just like we do with the technology? For me, it's logical. And for me, it also speaks to this dimension of the importance of being sustainable in our approaches. In as much as we say that, yes, we don't have the level of skills that we need to run the industries that we run in South Africa, but we also have a huge unemployment rate in South Africa. Yes, maybe there are other complex factors that contribute to how we end up there. But as universities, as government, as private sector, we need to say we are willing to play our part, create these safe lending spaces where startups from universities can come in with innovative ideas. And interestingly, yesterday we had the permanent secretary here in Rwanda of ICT saying that they have a policy around how startups can access government business, you know? And I found that very revolutionary, because it implies that the way we are thinking about the future of work, as we put those policies in place that give young people spaces to apply themselves, provide solutions, and of course, safe spaces. I think that safe space aspect is always a key part of it, but allow them to grow, get better at what they're doing. Just like Uber, when they started off, there were people who thought this is crazy, but some people gave them safe space, it got working, and before you knew it, it's a revolution. The same thing applies with generative AI, even though I must be quick to say that sometimes we need to be very careful as well with generative AI, because we don't even know who has programmed it and what are the algorithms that are behind it if we haven't built it internally. And that also poses a great risk in terms of the organizations. But in terms of the question that you got from the floor, the reason why I spoke about gamified learning is because this gamified learning approach is not teaching you things that you must go and study in a textbook. So with this gamified learning approach, we introduce technologies to you, we help you understand them, and then we say to them, choose the technologies that you're going to configure to grow your business, to ensure employee satisfaction, and also to ensure a future viable organization, right? And these things, there's no textbook that is going to teach you that, right? But as you gamify, you play different roles. You've got the tech team, you've got leadership roles, you've got social roles within this gamified environment. And through that, the critical way of reasoning to get to specific metrics is realized. And the more interesting thing is that we then also can induce COVID into this gamified setup where you've got two companies. Actually, we can have 4 companies competing in this market to see who's going to grow the most. So it's real experiential kind of learning where you need to be thinking on your toes all the time. And this is why this kind of gamified approach is not just for our students, but we're also using it for industry who wants to begin maybe shifting the way that they're thinking about what they're doing through this gamified learning approach, because we've got all the elements that from a technology perspective and how they link to one another and how this impacts the performance of the business. So already within the university, we are ensuring that we're encouraging this critical thinking, but also in industry. Thank you.
right. So we're going to wrap up with one last question that's just come in before I let the audience take a tea break and then we reconvene. And this one, Tony, is actually for you. The question says, what are your thoughts on career pivots or reskilling?
So, I've had 3 or 4 careers myself. So I would say, that's the answer. We all have to reinvent ourselves all the time. So obviously we support it, and we enable it through the environments we create. So I'm fully supportive.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the audience for the questions that came through, and also those who are watching us online. We really appreciate those questions. And if there's anything that has come through online that we didn't get through in this panel discussion, I'll try and see how we can filter it into the next one. So thank you so much to the Prof who is joining us virtually, Professor Khumbulani Mpofu, who is the Professor of Industrial Engineering at the Tshwane University of Technology, and of course next to me, Tony Vicente, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Adept IT. We're going to take a 30-minute break, and this gives you the opportunity to grab a cup of coffee, tea, some snacks, stretch your legs, including those who are online, and then we will reconvene here in the next 30 minutes. Welcome back to part 2 of our Business Day Focus 4.4, and welcome back to those of you who are joining us online. And if you trickled in a little bit late or you joined online a little bit late, once again, my name is Nastassia Arendse, and I will be the host for the rest of the session. So we sort of set the tone, I think, when we had a conversation about reskilling and talking about what a future fit workforce actually means for this world that we find ourselves in, especially when it comes to disruptive technologies. We heard from the professor from the Tshwane University of Technology in terms of the work that they are doing in order to get the young people within the institution ready for this future that we talked about. And then we also got some perspectives from Tony in terms of what the issues are the companies are grappling with, what they themselves as Adept IT still haven't quite figured out. And I think that is the whole purpose of this particular event, is that we do want to learn from each other. We want to ask questions, how people are doing it, some of the learning, some of the lessons along the way. And in this particular part of the conversation, we are going to be looking at harnessing disruptive technology. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to be welcoming our panelists. And as I welcome them, they will be joining us on stage. And starting off with Jonathan Oka. He is the founder and CEO of Cloud ZA. A little bit about Jonathan. He is a technologist with a strong background in traditional and cloud IT infrastructure with a focus on big data and AI, and he is passionate about cloud technology. You can grab a seat either on the couch, you can sit on the love seat. We'll find some lovers to join you. All right, and then we have Wynand Roos, who is the co-founder of the CRM team.
Yeah.
All right. You're going to get the toughest questions. I love when they're closest to the moderator. Okay, great. So he is an expert in the CRM field, and he has rather over 2 decades of experience. And then we have Brandon Williamson, who is the managing director of PayFast. And he is a veteran of payments and the e-commerce industry. And he's got more than 20 years of experience in sales, marketing, and online fraud management. Then we're going to be joined by Dr. Sean Kruger. He's a senior lecturer at the Center for the Future of Work. I don't know, you can join the other lover.
No, furthest away. I don't want to get in trouble. No, I know better. Sit far away.
Okay. And then we have Edouard Duplessis, who is the CEO of Fixed Mobile Telecoms. We have left the love seat for you.
You've got the spot.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, to Brandon, who is with us remotely. We can see him on screen. We've discussed quite a lot, I think, if you got bits of the first panel. And the one thing that stuck out to me, and it's actually what Tony said, and I wondered whether you shared the same view, or rather, how are you looking at things? And you can take perspective since 2020, or even take it a little bit further back. When we look at technology, is it the technology that's disruptive, or is it the business model that's disruptive? I mean, he kind of changed it a little bit, and I kind of liked that, and it kind of gave me a different way of viewing things. So let's start off with Brandon here online. I mean, how are you looking at disruptive technology? Is it the technology that is disruptive, or is it the business model?
Thank you very much for having me, and very disappointed that I couldn't join the other members on stage. I've definitely got some FOMO, just seeing everybody there. Yeah, in terms of technology and disruptive, and whether it's the business, I mean, it's a very interesting question posed. I honestly believe that I think that it's a lot more than just technology, right? So the business has to wrap it. If you look at it, if you purely at a disruptive technology, but the business doesn't accommodate the disruptiveness. And when I speak about accommodating the disruptiveness, you need to consider the leadership of the business in terms of, because it's got to be top down. And where you see this failing, and apologies if I'm repeating what has been discussed in the earlier sessions, is where you have very much an analog focused business. You have a digital focused or a disruptive digital focused technology element to the business, and they don't align. And it will only go to a certain extent within the pyramid, because somewhere along the line it will get blocked. So just to summarize in short, I believe it has to be a strong collaboration between the two. You can't have one or the other.
Veynand?
Same question.
Yeah.
So for me, it is using technology to drive those new business models. The two are directly aligned. I don't think you have one without the other. I think the strategy is always more important than the technology that's going to enable that strategy. But you need to use technology in order to test your hypothesis on these new business models. And those business models, like Tony rightfully said, is what is disruptive, not the technology itself. So I completely agree with that statement that was made.
Okay, great. Let's get to you, Jonathan. I mean, 2020, a lot has happened. I think COVID, if you were on that digital transformation journey, it either sort of heightened it and you suddenly, you were ready because you had been paving the way. And other institutions suddenly were thrown in and had to adapt. From the conversations that you're having with your industry peers or what you're seeing on the ground, 2020 up until 2023, what has happened with these organizations?
Maybe just a bit of history on that. We started in 2015, and starting in 2015 was very cold, so the cloud was really coming out of its infancy, getting into the space, and really in 2020 that really boosted the growth of cloud technology with remote learning services, remote working, access to a lot of the digital platforms, data analysis of data. So that really drove the spark towards cloud technology, and after that started driving skills development, because now people are seeing this technology is taking a foothold in the country, and there's a lot of investment from the hyperscalers coming into the South African shores and into Africa. So from that perspective, we're seeing a lot of uptake in cloud technologies, especially now, 2023. It's a big year, a lot of big conversations happening, generative AI is around, how do we provide efficiencies, productivity to our teams. So yeah, it sparked a lot of growth, especially around remote learning, education and growth and skills development locally, but yeah.
Edward, let's come to you here. There's a lot of noise in terms of what to take on, what to bring into the organization, and it changes all the time. How do you filter through the noise, and what are you seeing when it comes to what companies are grappling with in trying to filter through the noise and finding what's right for them?
Sure. So there's a lot in that space. I think when companies face new technology, they have to consider a couple of things. Obviously, there's a cost impact. There's an investment into the new technology. There's potentially an adoption problem where there's resistance to take on this new technology. We spoke about skills extensively. Skills and training is a major element that needs to be addressed, and ongoing training. And if you go more to the technological side of it, you sit with things like security. I don't think we've seen more security breaches like in the last couple of years. And what happened in the last couple of years were all these cloud-based things and SD-WAN things and all sorts of different technologies that companies use. And it seems like they're not getting the security aspect of it right. So those very things that are part of the disruptive strategy comes to bite them somewhere else because it wasn't securely put somewhere in the cloud. And then you have, I think, two aspects that go hand in hand. One is a vendor lock-in. So to what extent does the vendors allow you to cross-function with other vendors? How does this technology interoperate with that? And I think the rapid rate of change that we see in this space certainly impacts it to in a big way as well.
Dr. Kruger, if I can come to you here, Edward mentioned strategy, and we got to talk, digital transformation strategy or strategies. Probably over the past 3 years, many people in the audience could probably attest to the fact that they've attended many conferences that talk about digital transformation or your digital transformation journey along the way, and we always talk to people about the lessons learned. It can play a pivotal role if you get it right, but let's take it back here. Why do companies get it wrong? And why do they fail, so to speak?
Of course, I get the heated question. So, in that sense, a lot of the times we speak the speak, but we don't walk the walk. Because in the sense of, yes, we're going to be digital, we're going to use these technologies, I'm going to get a consult in, but we don't do it. And I think this comes down to what Tony said is the business model. I used to focus on business model reinvention. In the sense of, what are you looking for with technology? Do you want efficiency or do you want effectiveness? Do you want to do things better or do you want to do new things? And a lot of the times answering those questions is more difficult than you might think. So I think in that sense, there's a lot of the times that people don't know what they want in certain occasions. And if you don't know what you want, how can I give that to you? Henry Ford said, if I asked them what they wanted, they would have wanted faster horses. Now, sometimes it makes it very difficult for C-suite to go, my clients don't even know what they want yet until I give it to them. And when you get to that point and you can do it, that's where we see digital transformation and those companies exceed and excel. I mean, a lot of the times McKinsey wrote they have a 23 times more effective rate in attracting new clients when done correctly. But when do they know it's done correctly? They know, I want to make things better and more efficient, or I'm going to do new things that my customer wants, that pain point. From a university perspective, skilled and aligned graduates, which is, again, a very difficult thing to do based on the rapid development of where we're going through.
All right, on that note, Ovena, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about digital transformation is that it's happening whether you like it or not. It's accelerating every single day. Why? Because of cloud technology. So what's happening is IT used to control the digital budget. You had these digital operation offices and all these fancy titles within businesses. But what has happened is business was dependent on the marketing team doing marketing things, sales team doing sales things, the operational team doing operational things. And as a result, these entities within businesses got their own budgets. So what do? They go and buy a cloud technology, HubSpot for marketing, Salesforce for sales. And as a result of that, IT still needs to orchestrate all these things because there's a dependency on what happens in marketing and how that flows over to the customer experience when you have sales, when you go to the contact center. And I think that's where the digital transformation strategy becomes important because it's happening. The business units are buying these technologies because they need to deliver on their KPIs. And I think IT is playing a laggard game where they just need to try and make this stuff work without any budget. So it's quite a complex thing to address.
All right, so we'll get to Brandon in a bit because there is an aspect that the gentleman on stage mentioned that I want to bring to Brandon here. But before we get to that, Eduardo and Jonathan, if you can perhaps help us answer this one. How important is it to understand your why? Like, why are you doing something? Why are we going on this journey? And do you find that companies are getting to understand their why, or they still haven't figured it out? Is it just trying to keep up?
I think from that perspective, it's always about working backwards. And I think that's really crucial to see why you want to implement these solutions. Is it for efficiencies? Is it to understand my stock analysis? Is it to implement different solutions? And is it to go global? That's one of the other things. You start as a small organization, you've got the startup, and it's taking off. Do I have the scalability to go to that global stage and deliver these services? So we generally work with our organization to deal with customers and understand where they are in their journey currently, what they want to achieve, and how do we work backwards from that to achieve those goals in a repeatable fashion. Yeah.
Eduardo, the understanding of the why.
Well, it's a big question. Yeah. Simon Sinek is apparently the guy to ask. But I think there's two aspects here. One is the why of the organization, who is developing the tools, the disruptive technology, if you like. What is their why? They're going out to supply this and make it available to their customer base. How much do we think about their why? The people that we are selling to, what is their why? Is it because Henry Ford thought the Model T Ford will be better than a faster horse. Yes, sometimes we need to get him over that first hurdle. But do we actually listen to what our customers want to say? And what do they want? And we need to understand that. And yesterday morning, I had this most amazing experience. I was in an Uber, and often you get in an Uber, it's a very short conversation. Hi, John, I'm Joe, this is where we're going. And then there's not much of a conversation. But I got into the Uber, and there's this very friendly guy from Venda. And by the time that we got to the destination, which was only a 10-minute drive, we had such an awesome conversation. And when we arrived at my office, I said to him, fix mobile telecoms block I, because he now needs to repeat that to security so he can take me in. And he repeats it to security, and he looks back at me, and as if to confirm that I hear correctly. And I said, 100%. And he says, that listen is so important. If you scramble the letters in the word listen, it reads silent. I said, we don't actually cancel the noise in our own heads and become silent to listen. And this is a question that has come up so many times that I see asked, to what extent do we actually stop selling features and benefits and the gadgets that we do and become silent to listen to what the community that we want to sell to wants? And I think that's the key to me, is the ability to listen, and to listen very carefully, and then understand that. And yes, we can help them over the hurdle of things that they haven't thought about, but that's equally important. You need to align the why of the company selling to the why of the company you're selling to.
Brendan, let's come to you here. I'm not sure if you got that little bit, but as the cool kids say, Eduard was dropping gems on stage. He made us rethink the word listen to being silent. I never thought of it that way, but that's quite interesting. How important is that? Listening, not just to obviously understanding your why, but also listening to who you're trying to cater to on the other side?
It's fundamentally important in our business, and should be in most businesses, is the customer first in all respects. So we spend a lot of time in terms of engaging with our customers. What are their needs? What are their challenges? What are they seen as good? What are they seen bad? And we do that to multiple facets. I mean, there's personal engagement that we have. Even I as MD will get on the road and go and engage with customers. Listening to your customer is imperative to understand what next. It's also important, and we've seen the likes of innovation and disruptive technology coming into South Africa ahead of its time. We've got SoftPOS, which is the tap on phone payment solution, currently doing the rounds, and you'll see most of the acquirers have launched capabilities. We'll soon be launching similar capabilities. Are we ready for it? We may not be ready for it right now. It may be something that comes in 12 months, 18 months time. Have we gone to the customer and found out what the customer wants? Do they trust the engagement? So in everything that we do, in all our discussions that we have, even at the executive table, we always go back to the question and we ask ourselves, what about the customer? So fundamentally important.
I want to stay with you for this one, because you brought in the idea of around the executive table and the decisions that you make. For organizations such as yourself, or even others in the audience who are listening, when we talk about people who are the change makers in the organization, and we talk about leadership, who drives the change for digital disruption or your digital transformation journey? Is it your chief technology officer, your CIO, your CEO? Is it CFO? Like, how do you get all of the people in the executive room or around the executive table to be singing from the same page? Who takes the lead here?
It's got to come from the top. It has to be, the change has to be led from the top of the organization downwards. And then you've got to adapt it or accommodate for it. We spoke about the executive team. I made mention to the executive team. I mean, throughout the entire business, we've highlighted who we believe as the change makers. We actually employ change makers, and these are individuals that are specialists in what they do. So, and we want to learn from these individuals, and we put them in certain areas of the business where others can learn from them as well. So, and we know it's a knock-on effect. So we've got the innovators, and the big thing, you can have all these people, right? So you can have the change makers that sit in various areas of the business. You can have it from an executive perspective, but fundamentally the dots have to be joined. If you don't join the dots, then this is just literally just a waste of time. So you've got to introduce a business culture where the dots are being joined, collaboration in terms of session. And that's done through multiple facets. It could be done through meetings that are structured. It could be done in terms of how we do it. We've got an executive team, and then we have a next level executive team as well. And then we've got a very, very strong focus on middle management that takes the message from the top and relays it downwards and brings the message back up again. But what we did was as well to create this environment that adopts this process of innovation and open discussion. We redid our offices. We removed most of the offices. We created really exposed working hubs where the sales team can hear what's happening in the product team. The product team can hear what's happening in the market team, in the operations team. And we have these collaborative hubs all over the offices where it doesn't matter whether you're sitting in sales or whether you're sitting in marketing. You can stand up and join the conversation. I sit here today and I look across the room and my CFO is actually out of his office and he's sitting with the sales team and he's been working in the sales team for the last week. It's the type of, it has to come down to the culture of the business, but definitely led top down.
All right. Wynand and Jonathan, your thoughts on this? Because I've done a lot of tech conferences and most of the time the people in the room, it's either they come from the IT division. Very rare that I'll find a CFO actually in the room or someone from finance wanting to actually hear about what they're going to be signing off on for next week or for the next financial year. But when it comes to all of these changes within your executive team, how do you get everybody on board, Wynand?
So I think it's a lot more difficult than what we make it out to be, for the simple reason that if you get attached to an idea, so say for example you've got a change maker within the business, he promotes this idea of what the future of the company is going to look like, and you get attached to that idea, but you're not testing the hypothesis and failing quickly as a result of those engagements, you know that leadership part of the business can actually make the entire business fail or put you back 2 years as a result of getting attached to these ideas. So as a leadership team, you should create an environment, like you rightfully said, that enables teams to test these hypotheses on different components and different abilities. And you know, if it doesn't meet the business case, or if it's not going to show a return, and once again, showing a return is quite a complex thing to do as well, because you get a financial return and you get a benefit from customers' experience, which you couldn't necessarily measure. And I think that's what's essential from a leadership perspective, is to create that environment where people test these ideas, let them fail if they don't prove the business case, and move on. Yeah.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I think agreed. You kind of have to prove the case internally. I think there's two parts to that. Internally in our organization, we have to build certain things and make sure at the executive level they see the value in that. Just bring to example of one, my solutions architect says you can't put a statement of work out within a day, right? So I said, okay, cool. Let's bring in an AI on this. Let's put a generative model. Let's build a statement of work engine in, and let's do some transcription to that to bring some data out. And we got it down to 1 day. So now we see value to it, and now it's implemented in the organization. Obviously, there needs to be a human in the loop there, and we need to keep that flowing. But then on the organizational side of things, where we deal with customers, we've got the higher level CIOs, CTOs, and the CEOs that need to kind of make those decisions across the board for enterprise. And at that level, for the monolithic type organization, it needs to be driven from the top down. So those decisions need to come from the top down, bring it down to the lower levels, and at that point, the implementation happens. So it's twofold, startup versus enterprise. There's two different models to it. But I think once you see the value, as Edward said, you can definitely start driving that up the chain and then from decision down. Yeah.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we love in businesses is mavericks.
Yeah.
So you need to capitalize on those guys, and sometimes they just need to force the idea through in order to get management to buy into that idea.
Yeah.
So you know, I would love to say it's completely top down,
Yeah.
but it simply isn't. You need these mavericks to actually, you know, want to change the world, want to change the business model, and as a result, come from the bottom up. And that's where they meet, and the culture that's created to accept those mavericks that creates change.
Dr. Kruger, on what they've just said then, it can't always be from the top down. Sometimes it's got to be, you know, bottom up, and they got to meet, as Vainant is alluding to. How do you bring your employees along in this journey of digital disruption? And also, perhaps if we can tie in here, in the first panel, we were talking about reskilling, et cetera, but a lot of the times it's often seen from the idea of, you know, trying to get young people into new roles. But we tend to forget that there's a mature, older generation that's not necessarily in management or in senior roles, but they just the guys who are still keeping the organization alive. How do we not forget about them?
So this is also quite complex, but let me pull on this conversation to answer that. All of this is talking to what the business does, and that's create value. And a lot of the times, what value are you creating? Is it a financial metric, return on investment? Are you creating a much better customer engagement, which does customer retention, which has an intrinsic value? What value are you creating? Because that is then articulated to, if you're my manager, Sean, we want to make our customers happy. Okay, what does that mean? We want to make sure that their value is, when they log on, it's one point of contact. As an example, you know, when you're logging on, it's one interface. My value point is that. But now you have an entire cohort of employees. Your experience versus mine is very different. But if we understand what value are we creating for our customer, what pain point are we addressing? We're taking the dynamic of, we're not fighting about each other's skills, competencies. We're focusing on the pain point. And then we're seeing what we can add to create and achieve that value goal. Strategy, bringing everyone along. But if you cannot articulate what value you're creating and why you're creating it, and then using the technology to do so. I love technology, it's amazing. except when it doesn't allow me to do what I want. But anyways, in that sense, because then your value add and mine articulates to the same outcome. And then your value add and mine and everyone around that table, suddenly it doesn't matter if you're older, younger, you come with this fresh mind because we're looking at the problem and creating the value. The trick now is bringing in two different cultures. Young, dynamic, eager to learn. You know, you're willing. You've just seen someone do this amazing thing. You use TikTok. Please don't make me use that. Please, I'm trying. I'm old. I'm sorry. I refuse. But now they do. They understand, listen, that's the future of marketing. But I, on the other hand, understand of, okay, how are we going to articulate that in a value term and then come down to money, where show me the money. And then you bring in those two perspectives. And I think in that sense, it's again aligning to the value and bringing in the core competencies of what is new and what is existing and aligning those. The trick is that we have at a higher education institution is core competencies to make sure that when they apply for jobs, we are not embarrassed. We make sure that they are ready for the workforce. But you touch on a very difficult dynamic here. What do graduates account for? 5% of the population currently? What about the other 95%? Our biggest role now is to make sure our graduates are ready, but when they act, they think about how to bring society along with them. That's why we're also driving SMEs, entrepreneurship, and those things, that we don't leave the larger society behind. And that is a very big danger point that we're looking to solve.
That's quite interesting because I think on this very stage, different events that we've run throughout the year, we were talking about the idea of the energy transition, the just energy transition. And what does that mean in the context of communities, especially when we're trying to think about climate change and all of these issues. Eduardo, if I can come to you here, on the back of what Dr. Kruger's just mentioned, how do you go about empowering your employees, but at the same time understanding that as a business, you're part of a community and what you do does impact those around you? How do we go about doing that? And perhaps we can pick up from Tony and you can give us an example, because Tony was giving us examples earlier and we loved it. So perhaps if there's a success story of what you've seen in the empowerment space amongst employees, and also bringing the community with, if you can, along that journey?
Thank you. I actually have a very good story to share. We were working with a very large corporate entity in the latter part of 2020. Obviously, we were in lockdown phase. People were working from home. And so we were doing other work, and I got a session set up with the CIO of this very large financial institution. And a person who I got to admire at that point in time for his insight and his vision. And this addresses the one part of your question. What does the company do? So first of all, here we have a CIO that doesn't report to the CFO. Okay, so often in companies we see the CFO has the IT department. Okay, big problem when we have these discussions. Doesn't work. Okay, you need the CIO, CTO to have roles on the board directly to reporting to the CEO, advising the CEO. This particular CIO was on a VC with me. He said, Ed, this is the problem. We have 22,000 people working from home at the moment. Okay. Me, I am very privileged. I have the choice of 3 fiber operators in my street. I can comfortably work from there, and so does the bulk of this organization. But I have a call center with 1,200 people who don't live in areas where there's fiber or wireless or any form of decent connectivity. We have issued them with SIMs, 3G SIMs on an APN to go off and be productive. But we cannot get the call center application to work. Doesn't work. And the thing is, I hold life policies. I hold funeral policies. People are calling in. This is COVID. People were dying at the time. And they wanted to claim against that. And my call center is on its knees. I cannot function. And now I have to get these people to come back into the office and expose themselves to the risk of COVID in the office. I want them to work from home. And I want you to think out the box. And I didn't really understand the depth, the weight of his question at that point in time. So we then engaged with the team that he assigned to us. I said, guys, right, the first thing that we need is send me the address list. Speak to HR, get me the address list. They said, oh, that's not going to work. Okay. People record their address the day that they start here, but they've moved around, so that's not going to work. I said, okay. So we went off, we wrote the app. We sent the app to them on their mobile phones. They had to react to that. We identified where they lived. So we now have dots on Google Earth. So first bit of innovation that took place there. And we said, oh my word. This is Mitchell's Plain, Langa, etc. There's no infrastructure here. Nothing. So we engaged with the local communities. We engaged with a local guy that we've worked with for many years. And we said, right, you can't build a network effectively for 500 people, 700 people, which was the balance of the fallout. But let's see how we can do this. So what we did there is we engaged with the communities. We engaged with the church leaders, the schoolmasters, the community leaders. And we said, we want to service the area. So we put them into groups and said, right, here's a church. There's 15 people around this church. If we can get connectivity to the church, we can then from there put a high site up and service that community. It was a huge community project. Everybody had to get involved. We installed wireless antennas on shacks. People said to us, that stuff won't sit there for a day. I said, it will be there forever. The people won't touch it. We've not lost one device, not one. The community, full buy-in. We got all that people who were completely disconnected from the organization to become part of the organization again. They were sitting for months at home without being effectively part of it. They couldn't do their jobs, and they were getting very frustrated. They were empowered. They were able to do their work. They could answer calls like they were sitting in a call center. If you phoned in, you would not know that they were potentially sitting in a Zozo hut. And that is the story that defines this question. So you need to empower the people. You can't, it's not just a statement. It needs to come from this guy, the CIO with a vision that says, I want to solve this problem. And I'm going to engage with people who know how to solve this problem. And walk the journey with us. It was a very difficult project. But together we made it work. And I think that's a good story to tell and to use as an example when we think about these challenges out there.
Brandon, we like good stories, and I'm sure you caught that one there, quite a remarkable story. But are there other, stories like that, or perhaps even organizations or leaders that have navigated this idea of disruptive technologies, or even perhaps created an environment where you can foster or encourage innovation within your institution?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak briefly about us, but as a company. But I mean, if you want to look at big innovators in terms of individuals, I mean, it's everybody, top everybody's list would be someone like the likes of Elon Musk. He's not scared of disrupting. You've got the Jeff Bezos, you've got the Jack Ma's, and even closer to home, right now with the World Cup rugby taking place, you've got our very own Rassie Erasmus, who's not scared to disrupt in terms of the way that the game is played and how it should be viewed. If you come back to us in terms of just as a Payfast as a business, in terms of, from a disruptiveness in terms of technology, and I want to go back to a comment that Jonathan made earlier in terms of cloud-based. So we're a payments company, very much technology-driven payments company. And if you go back 5-6 years, everything was hardware-based servers sitting down in a data center. If something broke, engineer would have to go out in the middle of the night, go and see where has been impact, open it up, re-rack a server, and that would take anything from 30 minutes to hours to get that up and running. Introduction, cloud-based computing comes into play, and we look at this technology and go, well, what should we do with this? Should we perhaps be the first to go with this and move our entire infrastructure into a cloud-based environment? And we took as a leadership team, we took that decision to do that. And if you look at the knock-on effects of doing that, it wasn't just technology that would be ready in terms of being able to do the change into a cloud-based platform. The whole business had to be aligned to accommodate that. We went on to be one of the first payment gateways to be certified on the AWS platform. So that drove a change in the regulation in terms of how do we regulate now in this cloud-based environment. At the same time, the knock-on effect in the business in terms of change was the speed in terms of how we could do things, the speed of delivery, and very much a driver. And I always talk about meteorite moments. A massive meteorite moment in terms of disruptive technology or driving in the payment space in South Africa was the landing or the launch of Black Friday in South Africa. South Africa being the second largest adopter outside of the United States, everything had to get aligned. We went from running potentially around about 200 physical servers to accommodate. Within a matter of 8 minutes, we can now scale up to 800 servers on Black Friday to accommodate the volume. So everything moves across. Everything gets adapted to this change or to this disruption of technology to accommodate it. One of the biggest disruptors, and it's definitely worth mentioning, is Amazon. Amazon came into this world and they disrupted. They created a platform where multiple buyers can interact off that platform. And in the essence, and I want to go back to what I said earlier, and how they disrupted, they kept them and they placed the customer first. That's what they did. They said, how do we create this experience around the customer? How do we make it seamless, the checkout process? How do we bring this in, introduce this one-click checkout process, etc.? And then how do we accommodate that by introducing a logistics arm that allows the customer to get their goods the very next day? So if you want to look at examples in terms of the big disruptors, you've got the Amazon, which cannot be ignored. You've got the Ubers, you've got the Booking.coms, you've got the Airbnbs, etc.
All right. Wynand, let me come to you here. I think one of the things we spoke about earlier on was understanding the why. And there's a lot going on and trying to filter through the noise, and perhaps somebody says, we think AI is the route we want to go. the kind of questions you need to, I guess, be asking yourself in order to understand whether AI within your organization works in order for you to leverage it effectively. What kind of conversations should you be having with yourself or with the team?
Okay, so let me take a step back by saying for the last 2 months, I've just been doing one AI presentation after another. And I've realized that AI is the answer. People just need to figure out what the question is. And, that's a terrible scenario to be in. So I get invited to these C-level conversations where organizations ask me, so how is AI going to drive my business? And the first question that I ask is, which part of your business? Like, have you identified certain scenarios that you want to address? Are there certain bottlenecks? Are there certain processes that you want to affect? And the guys look at me like I'm stupid. So it's a scenario of, we've just invited you here to tell us how AI is going to improve our business. So I've written a couple of things down in terms of what companies need to think about. The first thing is, if you think about AI and the biggest failure, or the biggest reason why AI fails, it's not because of data, it's not because of people, it's because you can't prove the business case. So people don't realize that. Yeah. And you know, we think AI is cheap because ChatGPT is $20 a user, but if you start looking at the complexity when you start embedding AI in complex sort of industry solutions like SAP and Microsoft and these kinds of capabilities, you very quickly get to $1,000 a user a month. When you want to start leveraging those technologies. So some of the things that I've written down here is companies need to ask themselves, what is the first key priority for us right now? So that's the first thing that a company needs to answer. The second thing is, can AI make a large improvement in this specific area? So once you've identified the area, can AI actually make a significant improvement? Then you need to go and say, what part of this AI capability that you're implementing is actually going to be disruptive? Then you need to ask yourself, is there any vulnerability in my business that my competitors are going to use AI for to compete more effectively against me? Then you need to ask yourself, how can we leverage our unique data within our business to get a competitive advantage? So if you can't answer those questions, you're not ready for AI. And the reality is you can superficially use it. We look at things like Microsoft Copilot. So every marketing person out there is using ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot to create their marketing content. But how are they differentiating? You know, are people getting more, I want to say more clever as a result of these technologies? Or are they losing creativity because I just want to get it done as quickly as I can? So it's quite a complex scenario to address.
Let me come to you here, the cloud expert amongst us. What do you see as the challenges, especially when it comes to the adoption of cloud technologies and I suppose even some of the strategies that are being employed around that, Jonathan?
Look, that's really a two-sided question. We've got commercial, we've got public sector. Around public sector, it's always around compliance, regulation, security stays zero. It's very important. Now that we've become more advanced in terms of skills enablement locally, we see more architectures coming out that are enabling compliance around services. As well as in the commercial sector, it's about cost. How do I develop these solutions and make it cost effective for what I require? So, like I said earlier, 2023, we're seeing a massive uptake in cloud. There's a lot of different elements to it, and it really comes down to the business outcome these organizations want to achieve. We are working with universities and public sector institutes to transform their way they look at a lot of their data analysis tools. And the uptake of that is quite crucial. Also, with we are Amazon partners. We partner with AWS Advanced Tier partners, and we drive the AWS conversation locally in terms of how we can modernize a lot of the technology stacks internally. And with the point of presence being loaded here into the region in South Africa, in Cape Town, we're seeing a lot more uptake due to that compliance constraints before keeping it within the borders for public sector. So now that's changed, so the conversation has changed. A lot of modernization from monolithic technology into how we can look at serverless, how we can look at event-driven architectures. That circles back to the point from earlier where you don't want to be sitting like at a data center where you've got all this hardware sitting doing nothing really, and you really, the cost you have of that, also the power constraints in the country at the moment, that's also a big concern, especially at the university level that has it all on-prem. So we're seeing a massive uptake in moving to cloud technology to enable event-driven architectures, but also in private sector, how do they enable access to the customer? And that goes back to the voice of the customer and pay fast. And you guys are all mentioning that is how do we interact with our customers to understand their needs better so we can develop better products to service them? We're working with a startup, I can't talk too much about it, but it's in the informal trade of breaking the disparity between digital and cash. And I think that's a big disparity at the moment. The lower income is working with cash, where we've got the higher income working with digital banking technologies. And how do we bridge that gap using cloud technology? So that's something we're working with in the commercial sector and the startup space. But yeah, I think there's definitely an appetite for cloud technology for going forward, as well as with skills coming in now. By 2025, we'll be able to have more individuals dealing with enterprise-grade solutions much easier. Yeah.
Dr. Kruger, if I can bring you in here, Wynand gave us a checklist here that he had written down and he's mobile on some of the things that he encounters, especially in the AI space, and trying to find that connection with organizations who want to use AI. Are there pieces of advice or approaches that some organizations can consider if they've answered Wynand's questions and they feel like, yes, we know this, we have thought backwards, so to speak? What else can they employ? And I suppose in all of these topics that we're talking about, cloud, AI, etc., how do you look at it if you're not a big business, but you're a mid-sized business or you're a small business? Should you be getting on this journey or should you let the others lead?
It's a very tricky one, especially for an SME level. And to address your question, let's say they do and they are capable of doing those things. The first thing I'd say is leverage existing technologies. Okay. Know what works. A lot of the times people look to reinvent the wheel and go for the latest, greatest. Meanwhile, back to the point of, I can do something better than my competitor can. I can do it at a cheaper rate. Yes, I can do it. ChatGPT is an example. Hi, I need to build a website. Can you help me? Start by going, which cloud service provider? AWS. And in that sense, it's a helping aid and a helping guide, leveraging an existing platform to address your problem. Because what do they understand? They're able to be agile. They're able to leverage quickly and pivot. So they have that advantage. So if they can answer those questions, yes. I think the big thing is when you looked, and you've mentioned it, when you start to scale, that's when it starts to become very complex. Because if I have an organization of 10 employees, we all know what's happening. We all have our fingers on the pulse. We understand the value. We know, listen, we're leveraging ChatGPT. We've done this, we've done that. Now we are starting to scale. So now a solution that worked for 1,000 transactions a day, now I get a certain client on board. Now they're expecting to do 100,000 transactions a day. Suddenly, I might need an AI solution that makes economic sense just to duplicate and replicate those areas. But a lot of the times when that occurs, back to the issue that you brought up, a lot of organizations try to automate already failing systems, thinking AI will fix it.
Yeah.
Please don't. If it's not working today, AI is not going to fix it. It's going to make it worse, and then you're going to think AI is the devil. Please. Yeah. Automate and look at things logically. But back to the point of what Tony's mentioned. What is your business model? How are you looking at it? How can I integrate AI to make it better? Yeah. And then you bring in your CFO and you say, hi, Mr. CFO, here's my value proposition. Do the calculations and see if it makes economic sense. Unfortunately, SMEs don't always have that opportunity. But they are able to test, and you've mentioned it, test it, listen, it didn't work. Whoops, move on to the next thing. That whoops is not going to cause that complete failure of that institution, organization. But when you start to scale and do it at transaction levels that are high, That's when we need to get involved, and that we can prevent the crying and the later of "I told you so." Yes, AI is not going to work. It's bringing in those expertise and those kind of things.
And
Sorry, can I just sort of capitalize on what the doc has
Please
said?
do.
So one of the things that I started doing after engaging with all of these different AI conversations is I started loading AI models with terrible data. So what would happen is we'll sit in a meeting and I would say, well, I brought up this new AI model. It's got a beautiful interface in front of it like a human being. And you start asking it questions and it gives all the wrong answers. And as a result of that, the C-level will then say, yeah, but like the answers are wrong. And you'll go, yes, because the data is bad. And it's that sort of moment where people realize, well, okay, there's more to this than just this sort of superficial consumption of AI. I want to make one more comment, and that is that enterprise organizations have massive baggage. So as a result of that, there's divisions within these organizations that very much still run as pillars or silos in themselves. And there's divisions in that business that will scale and grow, and divisions that will eventually fail. So that baggage is something that small and medium businesses don't have. And that's where the agility comes from, which is quite interesting.
And if I may, maybe I should ask him to come lecture by us. It was a question you raised in the previous session. How important do we rank critical thinking? Top 5. World Economic Forum, job data, we're looking at from USA data, EU data, and African data. Critical thinking is top 5. We're still publishing it. We're getting to that, so it won't be embargoed soon. But exactly that. Critical thinking is asking, yes, you're telling me to do A, B, and C, but is it right? And yes, we're trying to ingrain that in our students as far as possible. To go, danger. When you're driving and your engine light comes on, we're trying to ingrain that skill. So yes, to also answer from the previous thing, we're looking to drive critical thinking so that when it's tested, and please do test and let me know, because how else? Because at the end of the day, it should raise warning bells. Because in Africa, our data is very low. A lot of these models are built on American data, European data, which has natural biases involved. So we can teach our students to think critically by the time they get to a point of when they are coding it, when they're building these models, they can already think, how can we fix those things in the future?
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to open the floor to any questions. So I'm going to pause my questions for a bit and just get some audience engagement. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we will get a microphone to you. There was an individual who was assisting me with the microphone. Do we have microphones in the audience? We do. There we are. If you have a question, do we have any? You can raise your hand and the gentleman next to me and Brandon will answer your questions. Let's just see. Okay, we do have a question over here, the lady in the red.
Thank you. I think the question is specific to Dr. Kruger. Since you're the academic in the room and we're talking reskilling and upskilling, and how easy is it to change curriculums? Because technology is moving so fast. Being a university, you're somewhat bureaucratic. The curriculum must be approved, developed, and maybe by the time you implement it, there's newer technologies coming. I appreciate the core skills that would be acquired during the tenure of their studies, but how are you as an institution trying to work around this flexibility and this constant change?
A very good question. Thank you for that. So institutions, we have our baggage. And part and parcel of that is change management and how quickly we are to adapt to change. Yes, we are experiencing rapid technological evolution. But what we are looking at is core skills that in our curriculum need to be focused on. A refocus within our paradigm. What should we be focusing on? For example, critical thinking. That is part of a lot of our courses. But now, how are we teaching critical thinking with technology? In exactly a case of you. Ethically, I'm not allowed to do that. That's why I'd like to bring you on board. But in that sense, we as educators need to think about how to integrate those and test those core competencies in new ways for using these technologies. Part and parcel of that is, and I'd also like to hear from a bit of the panel around this, is micro-credentialing, where when you do a module, you can supplement the module with a micro-credential. So for example, I do critical thinking and I do, let me think about my one that I struggle with, business analytics.
Yeah.
So in that sense, what I struggle to articulate to my students in that curriculum paradigm is, why are you assessing this data? Tell me why first, before we unpack algorithms and logarithmic arithmetic and all those things, tell me why, let alone what data I'm assessing. So within curriculum, we're looking to re-articulate what within that framework, what are we testing, how are we testing it, and then start to supplement those kind of things with new paradigms, new ways of thinking. So core deliverable is, I have a student who can process business analytics. They understand why they're processing it. They understand, now we come down to the how and the platforms to do so. And that's where the micro-credentialing starts to come in and the new ways of thinking. So instead of processing it on, ooh, which ones did you used to use? Quickly, I'm going to ask them. I used Excel back in the day. We still use Excel. But I mean, now you have so many platforms like Power BI, it comes to mind. It's new ways, new tools, but the outcome is data-driven decisions. But the core competency we're teaching within that curriculum is business analytics, making data-driven decisions. So I hope that answers your question. It's a very difficult and a very slow-moving program, but we're looking to supplement to make sure that our students, at the end of the day, our value proposition is a competent and future-ready work graduate.
Any other questions from the floor?
Thank you very much. My question goes to the founder of Cloud ZA. During the discussion, you were saying, your colleague over there was saying that we have rising security breaches when it comes to using cloud technology. How do we, because I'm in the manufacturing side, it's difficult for us to integrate cloud technology because in terms of latency, throughput, we have challenges there. And we have now edge processing techniques.
Okay.
How are we able to integrate that in our production process so that, and also inculcate the cloud technology solutions? I don't know
well, we'd obviously have to unpack it a bit further, but from a manufacturing perspective, there's so many different avenues for you to bring your data to the cloud and work in the cloud to develop your solutions and then bring it back out from to the actual premise that you currently need to have that compute running in the cloud. So you could look at options like that. You could look at data analytics to bring it in locally to do predictive analysis on your data. But yeah, through cloud technology, it's more of an enablement to get to your data, and then from the data, how do I get these business outcomes to assist us? So obviously in your field, there's different aspects to how the data needs to be aligned to your business outcomes. But I think from the global standpoint of where technology is going, manufacturing, agriculture, fintech, all of the different verticals, utilizing the service core of cloud technology assists and enables you locally to get the outcomes quicker to you. I know in the IoT space, there's a lot of technology where you do streaming and ingestion of data. And through that streaming and ingestion of data, you can get real-time analytics on that data, which can assist you. But obviously, there's still the physical portion of that world that you deal with. So maybe we can unpack that later on. But I think from a manufacturing perspective, there's a lot of wins happening in the cloud around that, especially around how artificial intelligence can assist you in delivering faster outcomes, being predictive to your stock analysis, and so forth. Yeah.
All right. Tony had a question.
I think this is for the Prof as well. So my question is around the digital dichotomy that exists today and your perspectives on where this is going and what we do about it. And I mean not only from the delta in the infrastructure, so someone in a rural environment versus someone in an urban environment, but to age differentials, cultural differentials. It feels a little bit like The same thing is happening with wealth concentration, that we are beginning to get technology concentration, but I'd really value your thoughts of where do you think this is going and what do we do about it?
Again, back to the societal pool. So from a skills development perspective, we're looking to move from computer skills, digital literacy, but making our people digitally fluent. Because in the sense of not all technology solutions fit all boxes. And I think in that sense, what we're trying to do from a skills dichotomy point of view is saying, here is what is out there on a very high level. There's AI, just to at least understand AI, IoT, big data, data analytics, predictive analytics, 3D printing, 3D scanning. The list goes on and on and on. But now you start to understand that I'm digitally fluent to go, I have a problem. I'm not home tonight to water my sprinklers or feed my cat. I can use an IoT device to do that. And I think in that sense, when we start to go down to showing people what they can benefit from it, from a cultural side of things, then they start to become willing to learn a skill to apply it. And we're starting at graduates because there is what we do have the benefit as South Africans is willingness to learn. You know what, I mean, in that sense, we are very blessed. I've dealt with, certain other institutions globally. If you're not willing to learn, it's a very difficult skills area. But what we're looking to drive is digital fluency across all subject areas to start to integrate technology solutions to fit relevant problems, if that addresses your question.
Have I got a second to respond?
Yeah, you can.
So I think, and I'm going to get myself into deep trouble here, but there's a political aspect to the question that you asked. If we just look at what happened with Starlink and what that would have enabled for South Africans throughout the country, and the reason why it's not happening at the moment is exactly why you get these concentrated technology advances and people are being left behind because of political issues. So a lot of this has to happen at a political level as well in order for people in charge to understand what impact that has on the normal man on the street. So, I think that that's an important aspect.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Prof, this is your lucky day. we work a lot in higher education from an adapt IT point of view. And one of our recent discoveries was that there is a lot of focus on the end user, that is the student. But actually the enablement of that is coming through the lecturers, the teaching staff. And we think that the fatal flaw is there. What are your thoughts in terms of how the lecturers themselves can be empowered so that they're effective in teaching the students and in imparting knowledge onto the students? Because the students are consuming these texts much faster than the lecturers, and there's a tension that is sitting there that in itself, in my own view, begins to be eroding, I think, the space that we are in terms of the uptake. Thanks.
So yes, I think you've also addressed a very big pain point within higher education institutions. And it was a discussion we mentioned. Teaching is an art. To articulate your thoughts and very difficult concepts to a student cohort takes years to understand and articulate. The problem we have now is people aren't experts in it yet because they haven't had time to adapt. And I mean, today you learn a language, and I told my mother this the other day, I needed to learn a new language, like French. I'm like, no. No, mother, no. But just to give you an idea of, it's such a difficult pain point for us as teachers and educators to stay up to date. And I think in that sense, we're also moving and changing our teaching dynamic to go to the student, teach us, show us to be better. And I think that is just a very big mindset change, to be open to, not criticism, but we can do it better, and having those open collaboration discussions and changing the way we teach. Because we cannot always be an expert in everything, but bringing in expertise in a room, especially like the social economic backgrounds. Someone who's sitting in a rural area has a much different perspective on AI and 3G technologies than someone who comes from a much more affluent area. But I think in that sense, it's about changing the dynamic of the lecturer as well as teaching as a collaborative person because we can't expect to teach all lecturers about all technologies. I wish I could, but realistically not. So I think in that sense, trying to tackle it and making it an open conversation and changing the way we teach to, again, how are we creating value in a competent graduate.
All right. We are drawing to a close. Any other questions from the floor? Going once, going twice. All right, I will leave it for you to discuss it with the panelists. However, before you go, I'm going to give the doctor a moment to breathe here. But in 30 seconds, each person here, let's start off with you, Brandon. What do you want us to walk away and think about that we have not been thinking about perhaps prior to going into this conversation?
I think one thing that's been mentioned, and firstly, I think we can share AI presentations because that's all I do over the last month as well. But really, I think it is the consideration that you don't have to adopt everything, right? So if you feel the need to adopt everything that crosses your desk from a disruptive perspective, well, you're not going to get very far. You've got to have a very steadfast vision in terms of what it is that you want to achieve with disruptive technology. And even in the inclusion of AI that was mentioned earlier. The other aspect is, though, that if you're not going to be part of it, you're definitely going to be left behind.
All right, Feinat?
I can't compete with that.
Oh. Edward?
I may have a message for those who are, the large organizations, the large mobile operators in particular, large connectivity companies. So a friend of mine was in the game industry, and if anybody of you know what a bubble the game industry was, when it burst, he was looking at alternatives. What do I do next? How do I actually survive in this world? So he went to draw a couple of 100,000 Rand cash, 100 Rand notes, and he went into his local township and into the town, and he said, "Clipboard, 100 Rand. Here's 100 Rand. The only thing I want to know from you, what you're going to do with it." So he handed out like 100,000 Rand in 100 Rand notes. So you got quite a fair feedback. The results of it was, take a guess. I'm going to buy airtime, liquor and food, in that order. Airtime, liquor, food. Do you know that the average person who uses airtime spends more on data than you and I spend on fiber at home?
Wow.
Okay? So, mobile operators, regulators, we've all seen this movie. I've watched the 5G movie for 10 years now, how it's unfolded, and there's a race to launch 5G. If anybody in the room can tell me what the business case for South Africa is for 5G, I'll be available afterwards. I really want to know. I really want to know. Here's my view of it. And for those of you who don't understand the difference in technology, where we are with LTE, 4G technology, you can have a range of up to, I think, 16 kilometers. Be away from the tower to use it. It gives you a maximum of 30 megabits per second. Okay, 5G, you need to be between 300, at max maybe a kilometer away from the tower, at extreme cases, but it's mostly short distance, 300-500 meters. And it gives you a gig. Okay, so who's it aimed for? Who's it aimed at? It's being rolled out in Sandton, Waterfall, Midrand, okay? There's still 2 million people in South Africa that's not connected. 2 million people who do not have a mobile SIM. There's no connectivity in their town. Yet, there's 113 million active SIMs out there. Double the amount of people that live in this country. So here's a hugely disruptive technology. But who are we disrupting? And what are we doing? Have you looked at what the operators paid for the spectrum? 4 billion, I think yesterday, the day before, there was an article, there's still 5.8 billion outstanding in license fees, spectrum fees. What do you get for the 5 billion that you spent in spectrum? I tell you what you get, a receipt and an entry in the Excel spreadsheet to say, this range belongs to you. Okay? Vodacom, that's yours. That's all it says. And MTN, you're not allowed to use it, this is yours. So they each paid a couple of billion rand to promote 5G in Sandton. Okay. But the economy is not only in Sandton, the economy is countrywide. And we're not looking at those. My business is in connecting corporate branches around the country. The most difficult thing is when you get your list and you say Lusiki, Toyando, Butterworth, getting connectivity out in those places are just nearly impossible. We are not applying the money correctly. Okay, what are we doing with 5.8 billion rand? Really? Where does it go to? And 5.8 billion rand doesn't buy you the technology to roll out 5G, it gets you the license to buy the technology and to roll out the towers to roll out 5G in the areas where it's least needed.
Right.
And that is what we need to address. Disruptive technology is sometimes disruptive. And it doesn't address things. And we think in the South African context, and when I saw this opportunity, I very much wanted to relay this message that we talk about stuff, okay, and we get excited about stuff, but we forget about the whole load of people out there that's not part of our community, and we need to fix that. And we have a job to do, and that's going to start at the top. We need to apply our money correctly. Just imagine we say, take your don't pay the 5.8, connect the 2 million people that's unconnected with that money.
Yeah.
Apply it to that. Great result.
Jonathan, I don't know how you're going to top that.
Sure. I would say the main takeaway would be grassroots level skills development towards computational thinking. Get them in young, start bringing it in the curriculum at primary level, teach them gaming formats of learning computational thinking, binary, and then make AI an extension of yourself, like the cell phone is today. Add that to your suite of skill sets, let it make yourself more efficient. And don't be scared of the cloud. We're here to assist.
Don't be afraid of the cloud. Doctor?
Don't be scared.
Don't be scared.
It's happening.
Yeah.
That's happening without you. And I think the best thing is join it. See it as a fun ride, because if not, this is going to happen without you. And it's a scary time to be, but try not to be scared.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Kruger, thank you so much for your time. Jonathan, Edward, Vainand, and of course Brandon are joining us online. Thank you so much for that engaging conversation. They will be around if you want to ask them even more deeper, tougher questions, especially our favorite doctor in the corner who ran away from me. You should have just said close by.
Close
This would have been easier.
Another lesson learned.
Thank you so much to our sponsors and partners, Adapt IT, the CRM team, PayFast, Cloud ZA, University of Pretoria, Fixed Mobile Telecoms, and the Tshwane University of Technology. Until next time, goodbye.